This is the Rebel Call channel. Welcome to today's show. The worst kept secret in the world is that our leaders, the wealthy, the so-called elites, the worst kept secret is that they want us dead, because it's very clear at this point that they want to kill us. And we can look at things like the Georgia Guidestones, which were allowed to stand on American soil for so many years, telling us that they needed to maintain humanity under 500 million people, of course in perpetual balance with nature, because, well, that's an okay thing to murder everybody as long as it's in balance with nature, right? And of course we know that they took down the Georgia Guidestones conveniently right before, well, we head towards 2025, which is what my video is about. And Joanne on the website posted this, and this is a great reminder. I'm glad Joanne posted it, so I want to thank Joanne for reminding me about what is coming in the year 2025, because I covered this years ago in regards to the Deagle report that was giving its data predictions on what the U.S. population would be. And this goes back to the year 2013, when they were talking about the U.S. population at 316 million people, and they were forecasting by the year 2025 that the U.S. population would be around 69 million people. And of course, at the time, people like me were covering this topic saying, well, some things are obviously going to happen for the population to go from 316 million all the way down to 69 million. And of course, lots of things have happened since the year 2013. In fact, so many things have happened that it's hard for many out there to even remember, other than the obvious, which of course was this massive outbreak that occurred that, well, forced people to poison themselves, which forced people to psychologically go through a lot of damage. And of course, since 2013, we haven't just had that. We've had these huge towers go up around us. We've watched the psychological operations occurring on a day in, day out basis in regards to civil war, civil division, turning people utterly insane to the point where they're castrating themselves. And on top of all that, we know about all these natural disasters that have continued to occur, which aren't so natural, right? We all know, or should know, if you're new to this stuff, if you're not familiar, they have the ability to manipulate the weather. It's called geoengineering, weather modification. There are many government documents that openly discuss the ability to control the weather. In fact, you can go back to John F. Kennedy and Lyndon B. Johnson back in the 50s and 60s talking about the race to control the weather and use weather as a weapon.
We shall propose further cooperative efforts between all the nations in weather prediction and eventually in weather control.
It lays the predicate foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
Fast forward to the year 2024, and most people don't believe that the government would ever do something so wicked, yet every time you talk to somebody who's a Democrat, they think that Republicans would do something wicked, and every time you talk to a Republican, they think Democrats would do something so wicked. But it's hard for them to actually process the fact that they're working together to cause this division, to cause us to look at one another while they're doing all of this stuff, like causing earthquakes in Turkey, causing hurricane after hurricane after hurricane in America. Of course, even recently what we saw are seeing right now in California, where they're causing massive shifts in the soil, that so much so that they're shutting people's power off. And really what they're doing openly in California is they're trying to restart the infrastructure, which is what they have planned for the entire earth. So that brings me back to this Deagle report. For those of you that don't know what the Deagle report is, or who Deagle is a branch of the United States military intelligence agency, which is a quote-unquote secretive organization that collects data for high-level decision-making purposes and prepares confidential briefing documents for agencies like the UN, the United Nations, the New World Order, and the NSA, the same people who are spying on us right now and spy on us on a day-in, day-out basis. And of course, you could thank the Patriot Act for that lovely that lovely addition to our day-to-day lives, giving the government the ability to listen to us, but we can only blame ourselves, of course, for allowing a lot of this technology into our homes, because that's really where they get the ability to listen and spy on us. So if the Deagle report, which they tried to scrub off the internet, but as most people know, it's very difficult to scrub things off the internet, unless, of course, you're trying to scrub off YouTube channels that are exposing the New World Order. But when it comes to certain things, you could take screenshots and screen captures. And thankfully, that Deagle report still is circulating. And I also want to bring attention to the Director of National Intelligence, the DNI, which is the head of the U.S. intel community, and a report that they put out, which talked about global trends by 2025 and a transformed world. This came out in 2008, so way before the Deagle report, where they're talking about a transformed world, a new vision of a world. So if you didn't know, 2025 is pretty close, and so are these fake elections that are coming at the end of 2024. So we can only look at this and say, well, what has to happen? What can happen if the plan was to get the population down to well below 70 million people in the United States of America? We could obviously look at some of the obvious, right? We know a lot of people are walking around right now that are ticking time bombs that are ready to detonate at any moment. In fact, some people were saying that there was a 5-year window once they put something inside their bodies where they would start dropping like flies, so to speak, right? So we can look at that, but we could also look at other chaos, right? We could look at weather modification. We could look at potential of a World War III-like scenario, or we could even look at what I believe would be the easiest way to depopulate, which would be a grid shutdown. Because a massive grid shutdown, of course, would lead to starvation, dehydration, and mass chaos, because the majority of civilians in our society don't know how to walk without Google searching. They don't know how to take a dump without having Google in front of them so that they could search how to properly wipe themselves. In other words, so many people are dependent on technology. With a grid shutdown, so many people would short circuit because they wouldn't know how to do anything without searching on Google or searching on YouTube for a how-to video. So those are all options that are in play. And of course, they took down the Georgia Guidestones for 2 reasons. Number one, there was a time capsule in those Georgia Guidestones, so there was a date plan for them to detonate those Georgia Guidestones. And number two, of course, if they're moving forward with a plan where people would obviously be able to see that the population was a lot lower than it once was, they might look at those Guidestones and get suspicious. But then again, there's people out there who still aren't suspicious of what's going on. In fact, there's people out there that are still going to their local Walgreens and CVS and poisoning themselves. So naturally, I ask, maybe we should look at a video from 6 years ago that was posted by this guy named Bill Gates. You may have heard of Bill Gates. He's got his hand in everything. In fact, I just did a video recently about Bill Gates' newest docu-series on Netflix about what's next, because Bill knows what's next, because Bill's one of the people who are plotting what's next. And of course, all they have to do is show up on a docu-series and pretend that they're philanthropists and they care about everybody, and all these suckers actually believe them. But Bill's even having a tough time convincing even the dumbest people out there that he's a good person, because many can see through and look at the face of many of these people and see right into their eyes that these are wicked, deceitful people. But Bill has a video out. It's called "What Could Cause in a Single Year an Excess of 10 Million Deaths." So I figured if we were going to look at the Deagle report and we were going to start talking about what could actually cause a mass extinction in the United States of America and a one on the earth as well, but specifically in America, our population in America is what is pinpointed as going down drastically. So Bill gives us some thoughts about what could happen. Of course, remember, this is pre-outbreak in the United States of America and around the earth. This is pre-outbreak. And keep in mind some of the stuff that Bill says, because of course, Bill's talking about, well, something that could cause 10 million deaths, maybe a war, or maybe a bioterror weapon, right? Some type of massive outbreak, he says, of course, before it happens. And note that the person doing the interview asked Bill if he's afraid that something will happen to him, and how quickly he dismisses that and says, oh no. Well, of course Bill would say, oh no, he's not worried about anything, because Bill knows that he's the one causing it. So why should he be concerned about something like this happening? Since him and his groups and his organizations are the ones who fund the terrorist groups. Let's hear from Bill.
Of all the things that are out there, what could cause an excess in a single year of 10 million deaths? A big war could, and a pandemic, natural or created by bioterror. In some ways, the bioterror thing scares me the most. All it takes is one small terrorism group.
Are you nervous about your own life and what could happen?
But even the U.S. has to think about its global health security.
Are you nervous about your own life and
No.
what could happen?
Of course, Bill's not afraid. I mean, Bill wants us to be afraid, of course, of these boogeymen that our government creates to keep us thinking that there are these people who are going to cause us harm. But really, it's our own government who funds these boogeymen groups, who aren't really boogeymen groups anyway, because it's just the CIA in disguise, right? And you may remember, if we're going to talk about mass extinctions, you may remember I covered this a while ago about the sixth mass extinction, which aired on CBS, which they've been talking about. There's a lot of articles out there talking about, well, how the climate issue is going to cause mass extinction by when? Well, by 2025, 2030. 1 billion people could die from climate disasters in the next century, they're warning. And of course, it's no surprise too, as you'll see in the end of the video, that the World Economic Forum is also telling us, well, how they're going to depopulate us.
In what year will the human population grow too large for the Earth to sustain? In 1970, the planet's 3.5 billion people were sustainable. Today, wild plants and animals are running out of places to live. The scientists you're about to meet say the Earth is suffering a crisis of mass extinction on a scale unseen since the dinosaurs.
Too many people, too much consumption, and growth mania.
You seem to be saying that humanity is not sustainable.
Well, humanity is not sustainable. To maintain our lifestyle, yours and mine, basically, for the entire planet, you'd need 5 more Earths. Not clear where they're going to come from. Humanity is very busily sitting on a limb that we're sawing off.
When the population bomb came out, you were described as an alarmist.
I was alarmed. I am still alarmed. All of my colleagues are alarmed.
The alarm Ehrlich sounded in '68 warned that overpopulation would trigger widespread famine.
Rate of extinction is extraordinarily high now and getting higher all the time.
I don't think you'll find a scientist that will say we're not in an extinction crisis.
Today's rate of extinction is up to 100 times faster than is typical in the nearly 4 billion year history of life. These peaks represent the few times that life collapsed globally, and the last was the dinosaurs, 66 million years ago.
There are 5 times in Earth's history where we had mass extinctions. And by mass extinctions, I mean at least 75%, 3/4 of the known species disappearing from the face of the Earth. Now we're witnessing what a lot of people are calling the 6th mass extinction, where the same thing could happen on our watch.
I and the vast majority of my colleagues think we've had it, that the next few decades will be the end of the kind of civilization we're used to.
The 5 mass extinctions of the ancient past were caused by natural calamities. Today, if the science is right, humanity may have to survive a 6th mass extinction in a world of its own making.
Our generation has reached a turning point, confronted by truly existential problems: climate change, exploitation of nature, nuclear possible incidents, or even worse, extreme poverty and viruses. They all can lead to an extinction of large parts of our global population.
Dear friends, scientifically, this is not a climate crisis. We are now facing something deeper: mass extinction, air pollution, undermining ecosystem functions, really putting humanity's future at risk. This is a planetary crisis.
This is a safety crisis, but above all, it is also a justice crisis. Many areas in the world are uninhabitable. This uninhabitable zone is increasing. If we continue with our greenhouse gas emissions, then by 2070, as many as 3 billion people will live in uninhabitable zones.
So yes, mass extinction, of course. They just have so much data that they're coming up with these theories, even though at the same time they tell us that we have an overpopulation problem, right? They're telling us that there's too many people in the world. That's what we hear all these people at the World Economic Forum, from Ted Turner to Bill Gates, constantly telling us we have an overpopulation problem, then telling us that a mass extinction is coming. How convenient. Then they guess they don't have to worry about the mass overpopulation. Oh, wait, they're concerned about mass overpopulation because they hate people so much and they want to see people die. And, well, they're the ones who are going to cause a mass extinction. Now, the other thing to note is how they can make it unlivable in certain areas, which is what they can do with weather modification. They can cause massive droughts, which make it very difficult for people to survive in certain locations. Now, I know a lot of people don't think that there will be a mass grid shutdown because they think that the grip that they currently have over society is so strong that they don't want to lose that grip. But in fact, shutting the grid down for a long period of time, which would be 3 months, 6 months, even a year, even longer, potentially, would cause a mass extinction, period. There wouldn't be food. People would be looting and rioting and going to places, grocery stores and taking stuff. And of course, remember, they want to kill off the infrastructure. So shutting the grid off would cause massive damage to structures, to buildings, riots, chaos. Then when they turn everything back on, whoever survives, of course, will run to their technology. I mean, thrilled that it's back on. Now, there might be a small portion of people that get off the grid and then realize what a better way of life it is if they could actually survive on their own. But they're not concerned about a small portion of people waking up. What they're concerned about is killing off a large portion of people and being able to do this thing known as the reset that they've had planned for a long period of time. So making it unlivable in certain areas through droughts, through hurricanes, through storms, through grid shutdowns would force people to be moved around as well, like cattle, into certain areas. Does that sound familiar? You know, all these smart cities that they have planned, the things like the line in Saudi Arabia, Amazon trying to build the city itself, right? Well, they'll have these all set up, and then if they make it unlivable in certain states because the grids don't go back on and they cause droughts on top of it, you'll be forced to move to locations that they already wanted you to move to. Thus, they'd be moving you around and herding you like cattle. Thus, there is a name of a channel called Herding Humanity, right? So I wanted to do a video covering that to keep everybody thinking about this because we're headed towards 2025. And right now it's kind of quiet, which is rare. And by quiet, I mean a few days of things being quiet because it seems like every other week there's a massive story, from assassinations to massive storms coming through to all sorts of just absolute nonsense that we hear getting spread through the media. Remember, they're doing this with their foot on the gas pedal because they know you're fully connected to the media. No, whether you're getting it from them directly or you're getting it from social influencers, you're getting a dose of their propaganda and their false news. And on top of all that, again, like I said, we're headed towards this fake election, which tells us that massive chaos is going to come. Because remember, everybody has been trained, whether they don't realize it yet, but they've been trained to deny the outcome of this election. The Democrats, if the Republicans win, will deny it because they'll come out with some story about Russian propaganda and Russian interference. And the other side, of course, won't believe it either if the Democrats somehow win. Remember, too big to rig. So there is something coming, something brewing. And we know that a lot of talk out there has been about Agenda 2030 moving to Agenda 2025. And I've covered that in videos in the past. So keep all these things in mind, that we're headed towards 2025. The plan overall has been to get the population down. You could look at many different things. We could all just say, well, maybe nothing big will happen. Maybe it already did happen. And there's a lot of people who are ticking time bombs who will no longer be here post 2025. We'll see. I thank everybody for being here. I hope you're all doing well. God bless you and your families as always.